Pull your chair a little closer to the fire, dear friends, and listen carefully. I have been keeping this story for a while now, and I think the time has come to tell it properly. Every English county has its own particular cruelty, and in Belwood County, that cruelty wore the very respectable face of common sense. The entire assembly believed Miss Willa Corbet would sign whatever document Lord Conrad Halverton placed before her. She had no money. He had the deed to her family home. In the arithmetic of provincial society, that calculation permitted only one answer. By the time he crossed the floor of Thornfield Hall toward her on that grey November morning in 1841, half the room had already decided the outcome. Solicitors exchanged knowing glances. Farmers in their best coats nodded slowly. Lady Renfield, who presided over the county's social calendar with the precision of a general loan managing a campaign, whispered to her neighbour that it was all very fortunate, really given the circumstances. As though poverty were a medical condition that charity was gracious enough to treat. Willa heard the whisper. She heard most of them. She stood at the far end of the Thornfield assembly room in her mother's grey wool coat, which she had taken in at the waist and let out at the hem, with a narrow collar of darker ribbon that almost concealed where the fabric had worn thin. She had not spent money on a new coat. She had spent it on her sister Nettie's winter boots and Lily's school fee, because that was the order of things, and she had made her peace with the order of things a long time ago. She was 27 years old. She taught the children of county families 5 mornings a week at the village schoolhouse and 2 afternoons at the Renfield estate. She had done so for 3 years, since their father died and their brother Aldrich had handled the estate. Handled it, and then vanished to Scotland with creditors behind him and a letter full of apologies that explained nothing useful. The Corbet House stood on 12 acres in the Eastern Valley. The upper pasture had not produced income since Aldrich mortgaged the grazing rights. The house itself, Corbet House, had been deeded as collateral against a loan Willa had not known existed until after her brother left, and which Lord Conrad Halverton now held. He stopped before her. He was 36, dark-haired, with the careful manner of a man who has learned to be very still in rooms where other people are less careful. He was not old aristocracy. His title had come with purchase, and a grandfather who had been clever in trade. The county respected him for his money, and resented him quietly for his origins. Miss Corbet, he bowed correctly. Lord Halverton, she did not curtsy. Curtsying felt like a concession she had not yet made. You have reviewed the final demand. I have. 30 days is a reasonable period. 30 days in winter, when the schoolhouse term is mid-session and my sister sits a county examination, is not a period designed for my convenience. A slight pause. I had not considered the examination. I had noticed that. Several people nearby were listening with the polite intensity of those pretending not to listen. Willa was aware of them. She was always aware of them. Thornfield Hall had excellent acoustics, fine for speeches, disastrous for privacy. Lord Halverton reached into his coat and withdrew a folded document. He did not open it immediately. He held it the way a man holds something he considers a solution. I had thought, he said carefully, that we might resolve the matter here, publicly, so there could be no ambiguity. Willa looked at the document, then at him. There is no ambiguity. The Corbet deed is held against a debt my brother incurred without my knowledge. I cannot repay it in 30 days. You are aware of that. Yes, he did not look away, which is why I am offering a different resolution. Lady Renfield, who had drifted imperceptibly closer, clasped both gloved hands before her. A farmer near the window straightened in his chair. Lord Halverton unfolded the document. It was not the notice of seizure Willa had expected. It was a marriage settlement. Before the witnesses assembled here, he said, in a voice that carried without effort, I am asking Miss Willa Corbet to do me the honor of becoming my wife. The room exhaled as one. There, someone murmured near the back. That solves it. Sensible man, said another. Willa looked at the settlement in his hands. It was beautifully drafted. She could see that from where she stood. Neat columns, careful terms, the kind of legal precision that took someone a great deal of time and care. She looked at Lord Halverton's face. He was watching her with the composed expression of a man who has prepared for one answer and is allowing room for the other, but only just. She understood everything in that moment. He had not come here today to resolve a debt. He had come to resolve it in front of witnesses, because the witnesses were the mechanism. Because before the assembled county, before the magistrate and Lady Renfield, and 12 farmers and a solicitor from Exeter, her refusal would cost her more than her acceptance. He knew that. He had calculated it. She looked at the settlement document once more. Then she looked at him. "Did you purchase the Corbet deed?" she asked, "before or after you decided to offer for me?" The room did not go silent immediately. Silence arrived in stages, spreading from the front to the back like frost crossing a window. Lord Halverton's expression did not change, only the stillness of it deepened. "This is not the appropriate." "You chose the setting." Willa kept her voice level. "I am simply asking a question, before or after." A solicitor near the window coughed. Lady Renfield's smile became fixed. "I acquired the note," Lord Halverton said carefully, "because I understood the family required assistance." "You acquired the note 2 weeks before my brother left the county. Did you assist my brother in arranging his departure as well?" The silence this time was complete. Lord Halverton's jaw tightened. "Miss Corbet, you are emotional." Willa almost laughed. She had heard those words before, from the school board, when she had pointed out that the eldest Renfield boy was copying from his neighbour. From the village magistrate when she had presented itemized accounts showing the schoolhouse fund was £2 short. Emotional. The word men reached, for when they wished a woman would stop being correct. "Lord Halverton," she said, "you presented a marriage settlement before an assembly with 60 witnesses because you believed my circumstances made refusal impossible. That is not sentiment, that is strategy, and my answer is no." She heard a glass strike a table somewhere behind her. "No," she said again clearly, so there could be no ambiguity in the excellent acoustics of Thornfield Hall. "I will not marry a man who placed a deed between us and called it a proposal." Lord Halverton folded the settlement. He did not raise his voice. He bowed correctly, as before, though with slightly less depth. "You understand what the 30-day notice means?" "Yes, I have 30 days to find another way." He left the assembly floor. The room erupted in whispers the moment he reached the door. Willa picked up her coat from the chair where she had left it, walked to the entrance of Thornfield Hall, and stepped outside into the November cold. "Now, dear friends, if you are the sort who stays beside the fire until a story is properly told, and I believe you are, or you would not still be here, do stay with us at Moonlight at Bellwood. There is considerably more to come, and I promise you the best part has not yet arrived. Subscribe if you have not already. The fire will keep, and so will I." She had no hired carriage. She had walked from the village 40 minutes each way, because carriage hire was not in this month's accounts. She was 3 streets from Thornfield Hall when she heard hooves slow behind her. Lord Halverton's carriage came alongside. He did not call to her, the door simply opened. "You will be cold," he said from the darkness inside. "I am frequently cold," she kept walking. "Miss Corbet." "The road is public, Lord Halverton. I am not required to share it." The carriage rolled beside her in silence for a moment. Then he said, "I did not know your brother would flee." She stopped walking. "I acquired the note because I was told another creditor, a man named Thorn, who works at my uncle's direction, intended to purchase it and make immediate demand. I believed I was preventing that." Willa turned to look at him. He had stepped down from the carriage. Rain had begun, quiet and cold. "Your uncle," she said. Lord Ambrose Halverton. He manages the family trust accounts. And Mr. Thorne works at your uncle's direction. Yes. Then why, Willa said slowly, is the 30-day demand letter signed by Mr. Thorne? Lord Halverton was very still. I beg your pardon. The notice I received. The final demand. It was not signed by your solicitor. It was signed by a Mr. N. Thorne of Tiverton Lane, Exeter. She watched his face. I assumed they were the same office. She saw the calculation move through his expression. Not dishonesty, something colder. The look of a man realizing he has been standing in a room he believed he controlled, and discovering someone else had the key. They are not the same office, he said. No, Willa agreed, they are not. She did not accept the carriage. She walked home through the rain with that information pressed against her chest like a document she intended to read more carefully in better light. Corbet House was cold when she arrived. Nettie met her in the hall with a shawl. Lily appeared at the top of the stairs with a candle. Both of them had been waiting, which meant neither of them had been sleeping. Well, Nettie asked. Willa hung her wet coat on the hook, he proposed. Lily's candle wavered, Nettie's eyes went wide. Before the whole assembly, Willa added, with the county magistrate present. A very long pause. And, Nettie said. And I refused. Lily sat down on the top stair. Nettie sat down on the bench in the hall. Neither of them spoke. Then Nettie said quietly, We are going to lose the house. Perhaps. Willa. Her sister looked at her with dark circles under her eyes from studying and from too many nights of quiet worry that Willa knew about and never acknowledged aloud. I am frightened. I know you are going to tell me to be brave, and I am trying, but I am frightened. Willa crossed the hall and sat beside her. So am I. You never act like it. I know, that is a fault of mine. She took her sister's hand and held it. I am frightened too, Nettie. I have been frightened for months. But I think I may have found something today that changes the situation. May I have an hour in Father's study? She found the second ledger before midnight. It had been pressed behind the false back of the writing cabinet, behind a row of outdated estate maps that no one had touched in years. The first page was dated 3 years before their father's death. It was not the household accounts. It was a record of payments. Amounts deposited into an account at a banking house she did not recognize, cross-referenced with a name she recognized immediately. Lord Ambrose Halverton. Payments had been flowing from Ambrose's trust accounts to an intermediary, who had then paid Aldrich Corbet in quarterly installments. 3 years of them. She turned the pages carefully. In the margins, in her father's cramped handwriting, were notes, surveying fees, Eastern Valley soil analysis, geological consultancy, London. Why would anyone pay for a geological survey of the Eastern Valley? The Eastern Valley produced almost nothing. It was the poorest portion of the Corbet land, rocky, difficult to farm, the one piece Aldrich had not been able to mortgage because no lender thought it worth the paper. Near the back of the ledger, tucked between 2 pages, was a folded report from a firm of London geologists. It was dated 4 years earlier. It described the Eastern Valley in language that was careful and technical, and which Willa read 3 times before she understood it fully. Kaolin, high-quality kaolin clay, running in a seam below the surface, across nearly 8 acres of the Eastern Valley. Sufficient quantity for commercial extraction. The report named 3 London pottery manufacturers who had been quietly seeking a source of this quality, since the Staffordshire supply had grown inconsistent. The Eastern Valley was, in the assessment of qualified geological opinion, worth more than the whole of the remaining Corbet estate several times over. And Lord Ambrose Halverton had known this for 4 years. He had paid Aldrich to create the debt. He had arranged the loans through men whose names meant nothing in Belwood County. He had positioned his nephew, Lord Conrad Halverton, who had genuine feelings for Willa Corbet, and who could be trusted to purchase the note in the belief he was being generous. as the visible face of the arrangement. If Willa accepted the marriage, Corbet House and its Eastern Valley would eventually fall under Halverton management. If she refused, and the house was seized, Ambrose could purchase it through an intermediary before anyone understood what lay beneath the poor soil. Either way, the clay belonged to him. Willa sat in her father's cold study until well past 2 in the morning, with the geological report in one hand and the ledger open before her, and she felt something she had not expected to feel. She felt the specific anger that comes not from being harmed but from being underestimated, from realizing that someone had constructed an entire architecture of deception around the assumption that she would never think to look behind a row of estate maps. She was at Lord Conrad Halverton's door at 8 o'clock the following morning. He received her in his study without making her wait, which surprised her. He was already at his desk, and he looked like a man who had not slept, which she found, under the circumstances, appropriate. She placed the geological report before him, without preamble. He read it, then he read it again. She placed the ledger beside the report. He read that too, in silence, and she watched his face while he did, watched the moment his expression moved from careful professional attention into something rawer and less composed. "Thorn," he said when he finished, "the same man who sent the demand notice. Under your uncle's direction." "Yes." He set the ledger down. "Miss Corbet, I did not know about the clay. I did not know about your brother's payments. I purchased the note because my uncle told me your family was in genuine distress and that Thorn intended to move against the property without delay. I believed I was protecting you." "I know," she met his gaze. "I also know that you believed the debt created a situation in which I would be more likely to accept a proposal that I might otherwise have had the luxury of considering slowly and honestly." He looked at his desk. "Yes. You may admit that without it excusing your uncle's conduct, and my own, does not excuse itself," she said, "but it is of a different order." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "The county records office opens at 9. My uncle filed a conveyances application through Thorn's firm 2 days ago. If he moves the clay survey into a shell company's name before then we should go now," Willa said. "Dear friends, I will not pretend the next hours were simple. They were not." The county records office was staffed by a single overworked clerk who had to be persuaded, gently and then firmly, that a conveyance filed under an unfamiliar company name on the previous Tuesday required immediate examination. The clerk's supervisor had to be fetched. The supervisor's superior had to be consulted. By the time they located the filing, it was past noon, and Willa was beginning to understand why corruption so often succeeds. Not because people do not care, but because the machinery designed to stop it moves slowly and requires so many polite conversations in cold corridors. But the filing was there, and attached to it, through a chain of company names that Lord Conrad Halverton's own solicitor spent 2 hours tracing, was a signature. Lord Ambrose Halverton. The county magistrate, presented with the geological survey, the ledger, the payment records from the banking house, and the conveyance filing, issued a suspension of the Corbet deed notice that same afternoon. Lord Ambrose Halverton retained 3 barristers. The proceedings lasted 6 weeks. I will not walk you through every hearing, dear friends, because I value your patience, and there are only so many hours beside a fire. What I will tell you is this. Aldrich Corbet wrote from Scotland and offered to testify in exchange for a reduced settlement of his own debts. The court accepted. Miss Thorn, presented with the evidence of the forged demand letter and facing disbarment, provided a full account of the arrangement in writing. Lord Conrad Halverton appeared before the county magistrate and said, without being asked and without being advised to by his legal counsel, that he had purchased the Corbet deed in partial expectation that the resulting situation would make his proposal more likely to succeed. He said that he regretted it. He said that the woman who had refused him had done so correctly, and that he wished to place that on record. Willa heard about this second-hand from the court clerk, because she had not been present. She was teaching a morning class when it happened, because November examinations would not pause for a hearing she was not required to attend. She thought about it for a long time afterward. Lord Ambrose Halverton was removed as trustee of the Halverton family accounts. The conveyance was voided. The Corbet deed was returned to the family free of the inflated debt, with the legitimate original loan, a sum considerably smaller, without 3 years of accumulated interest calculated on stolen income, restructured over a term that the Eastern Valley clay lease could meet twice over. The valley was leased, not sold. Willa insisted on that. 3 pottery manufacturers made offers. She chose the one whose representative actually walked the land before making their bid, and could explain, without hesitation, what they intended to do with it. The lease income went into a family trust administered jointly by all 3 Corbet sisters. Corbet House was re-roofed before spring. The eastern pasture received new drainage. Nettie passed her county examination with distinction. Lord Conrad Halverton sent no flowers. He sent no ring, no letter of apology dressed up as affection, no attempt to call upon them, as though his assistants in the records office had purchased something it had not. He sent only the legal documents required to complete the trust registration, each addressed formally, each signed with his correct title, each asking for nothing. Willa noticed his absence the way you notice when a room has stopped making a sound you had grown accustomed to. Not immediately, and not comfortably, but with a quiet and growing awareness that the quiet is different from peace. 6 weeks after the hearing, she received an invitation to the annual County Land Assembly, the same gathering at which the Halverton Trust reforms would be formally announced before the assembled landowners of Bellwood County. She went. The hall was full. Lord Halverton stood at the front and spoke for 20 minutes about transparency in trust administration, about the harm that had been done to tenant families through similar schemes over many years, and about the reforms he intended to implement. It was a careful, thorough, unsentimental speech. At the end of it, he paused. "I must correct something," he said, "that was said in this hall 2 months ago." The room became still. Miss Willa Corbet was told by the implication of every face in this room that she had no choice but to accept what I placed before her. She was poor and I was not, and that calculation was considered sufficient. He looked toward where she sat, near the back of the hall. It was not sufficient. It was not even a question. She refused because she had every right to refuse, and because refusing it exposed a scheme that had been operating in this county for 4 years, harming families whose names most of us in this room never thought to inquire about. His voice remained steady. The assembly remembered the proposal. It would do well to remember the refusal. No one spoke for a moment. Then a farmer in the 3rd row began to clap. Then another. Then Gabriel Peake, who had managed 3 county estates over his long career and trusted very few people entirely, put his large hands together and kept them together until the whole hall had joined him, not applauding a proposal, not applauding a rescue, but applauding a refusal and the intelligence it had taken to make it count. Willa did not cry. She was not that kind of woman, not in public. But she sat with her hands folded in her lap and felt something release in her chest, some tightly held thing that she had been carrying since November and had not had time to put down. She found him afterward near the side door, where he stood speaking with the county solicitor. He excused himself when he saw her approach. He did not come to meet her halfway. He allowed her to decide the distance. "You said you would ask nothing today," she said. "I meant it." She looked at him. He looked back. He had learned, somewhere in the past 2 months, to simply look and not immediately fill the space with words. It was a considerable improvement. "I have an observation," she said. "You may make it. You are considerably less difficult to speak with when you are not holding a deed." He almost smiled. "I have nothing in my hands at present." "I am aware of that." She paused. I also have an observation about the speech. Yes. You said the assembly would do well to remember the refusal. But you did not explain why. He waited. A refusal is only worth remembering, Willa said, if it was the right answer, and the right answer is only visible if someone was willing to ask the right question first. She met his gaze steadily. I have been thinking about that for some weeks. So have I, he said, for somewhat longer. She extended her hand, not a curtsy, not a concession, simply a hand offered on her own terms. He took it carefully. One conversation, she said, nothing more, nothing less. And the length of that conversation. As long as it requires to be honest, and no longer. They left the hall together. The county watched. The county for once had very little to say, because whatever this was, it belonged entirely to them and to no one else. I have told you this story, dear friends, because I think it contains something worth holding, not merely the romance, though the romance is there, and it does resolve, and yes, she eventually says yes again privately, without a deed or a county assembly or anyone watching, with a plain ring that fits poorly and has to be resized twice, and with full knowledge of what she is choosing and why, and because she wants to, which is the only reason that has ever been sufficient. No, the part worth holding is simpler than that. Poverty is not a form of consent. Need is not an answer, and a woman who asks the right question in a room full of people who have already decided the outcome, that woman is not causing trouble. She is doing the only honest thing available to her. The county of Bellwood eventually forgot most of what happened in Thornfield Hall that November. People forget, dear friends. That is the mercy and the danger of memory both. But Willa Corbet remembered. She kept the geological report in the Corbet House estate office, beside the deed that had once been held against her, beside the ledger with her father's careful notes in the margins. She kept them not as trophies, but because documents tell the truth, long after rooms have tidied themselves up and moved on. And Corbet House still stands. The Eastern Valley still produces clay, fine, pale clay, the kind used in good porcelain, the kind that holds its shape under pressure and comes out of the kiln stronger than it went in. Some things, it turns out, have far more in them than anyone thought to look for. Stay warm, dear friends. Stay curious. Come back to us at Moonlight at Bellwood, where the fire is always lit and the next story is already waiting.